everyone. Welcome to the continuing conversation around art, placemaking, and how to create meaningful experiences in the built environment. I'm your host, Martha Weidman, CEO and co-founder of Arts. And before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you about the ebook that we recently released, The Art of Placemaking. It explores 5 fundamental principles about creating one-of-a-kind destinations through the power of art and culture. And for a free download, go to 9.arts.com/placemaking. Keep in mind that's all spelled out NINEDOTARTS.com/placemaking to get yourself a copy. Today, I'm introducing the one, the only Molly Casey, Arts Chief Curator and co-founder. Gosh, it's been a long history with her, and I couldn't be more excited to share this episode with you all. Molly and I have been working together for 15 years. She's going to share a little bit more about her role as Chief Curator and everything that goes into helping clients create one-of-a-kind spaces and experiences where people want to be. She's going to share about the many joys of working with artists, getting to uplift creative communities across the country, and different lines of Arts business, how to maximize your art budget, how to create authentic, hyper-local art experiences that can address gentrification, build community goodwill, and support overall community buy-in for large-scale developments and projects. She's got some incredible project case studies like the Citizen Apartments, the Exchange at Boulevard One, and many more. So I am so excited for you all to hear from my business partner, my dear friend, and the best curator in North America, Molly Casey. Hi, everyone. Welcome to I'm really excited today. You might tell from my voice, but I now have the best. I know I say this every time, but we really have the best guest on the show today. I have the great fortune of bringing on my friend, my ride or die, Arts co-founder and chief curator, Molly Casey. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Best podcast ever! So happy to be here. It's like we hang out all the time, but we never get to do this. This is super cool.
Now you're all going to be able to see what really happens behind the scenes at Arts. So a lot of you that are listening today, you come from the commercial real estate community, you come from the architecture and design community, you come from the art community, and you might know a little bit about Arts, and you might be used to hearing from me, but I want you to get to know Molly today. So Molly, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about you, our evolution together, and what it is that you do as chief curator here at Arts.
Sure, absolutely. Happy to share. Well, fun facts about me. Born and raised in Denver, left a few times, but ended up coming back. As always, it's the best place to live. I love art. I love development. I love creating amazing spaces for people to enjoy. And I love watching artists get checks for their artwork. So those are some things about me.
Fun part.
It's the best part. It's the best part. And then seeing the joy on like the public space when they get to experience the art, it's just like a beautiful, beautiful thing. I mean, you and I, gosh, we go way back. Like, I don't even know now how many.
Let's take them way
back. I met Martha. Gosh, we got together at Walker Fine Art. I met you there. I was hanging out in the gallery looking for some artwork. And I was introduced to you through Bobby Walker. And I was like, this girl's cool. I like her. We could get along.
I was like, I love her too.
And that was pretty fun to know somebody that was in the art world that was like similar age, like really into it. Everything from there is history. Like we just continued to run into each other, even if we didn't want to. That wasn't a possibility. I think the universe made it its mission to make sure that we were going to be together forever.
It was written in the stars, really.
It was written in the stars. So that was inevitable. So yeah. And then I remember that one day when we decided, okay, let's figure out if we're going to do this or not, like actually start our own business. And I remember we came and I was so nervous. I brought my list of all the things I hate doing about my job back then and all the things I loved, and you brought yours, and we traded, and it was like, again, stars aligned, and it was like everything that I didn't like doing, you like doing, and the opposite. It was so perfect, and I was like, this is gonna work.
And Nine
So
Dot Arts was born.
Nine Dot Arts was born right then and there. What else am I talking about? Oh, what I do as chief
Yeah,
curator.
tell us
Yeah,
about like what it means to be the chief curator.
well, it means making sure that all of our projects are exceptional, that we are constantly reinventing what spaces can be and feel and do for people and for our clients. And also making sure that we're consistently finding new artists in new fields from all different demographics to raise them up and bring their artwork to the forefront. So it's a mixed bag. Got to make sure we're honoring the art community there, especially in the conversations around DEIB, and making sure that we're really finding artists that are underrepresented and bringing them to the forefront and giving them an opportunity. Because we all know that is a critical thing, and we can help influence that. And also making great spaces. I mean, our clients come back because they love what we do for them, and we want to make sure that every single client has their own special, unique experience with Nine Dot Arts, and that's what I have to make sure happens every day.
Sounds like a fun job.
I like it. It's been fun so far. And mentoring, I guess that's the other thing that I forget to mention, because I feel like it just kind of like happens, but it's true. I mean, we've got 6 curators right now, which is the most we've ever had. And I get to, help the associate curators and teach them things. And I can be the wise old curator, teaching them the ropes.
Yes, the wise old curator in her 30s.
Not for too much longer.
Well, for those of you who are listening and learning new things about Nine Dot Arts, I can elaborate on that a little bit more. So Molly was talking about our team of curators. So we have a team of specialists here at Nine Dot Arts. There are about 32 employees across the United States. So our team is based in Denver, Seattle, Atlanta, Charlotte, North Carolina, and New York City. So our team members are all across the United States, and the artists that we work with are all across the world. So we built a database called Dotfolio, where artists can share their portfolios of new work with our curatorial team and people like Molly. And that database has over 10,000 artists. So it's cool to just see how much the company has grown and our reach has grown. Primarily, our work is domestic in the US, but the artists we work with are international. And we've done a handful of international projects as well. So keep an eye. Maybe that's our next plan for 2025, 2026 as we grow. But our team of specialists really has kind of unique functions across the company. So we have our curatorial team who works with cities, real estate developers, people who own large, plots of private land and want to put together a cultural plan, or people who have hotels and want to do artwork for their properties or activations in their spaces. And we work with them to develop a vision, a concept of how to really bring these places to life and honor the communities that surround them. And in that process, the curatorial team puts that vision together and then helps to select the right artists and partners to bring that to life in a genuine, authentic way that feels right for that particular community. So that's like the curatorial focus, which is, again, so much of that creative drive of Nine Dot Arts. But then there are all these other pieces that are so important to making it happen too. We have our acquisitions and project management team that handles everything from purchase orders. So on one project, we might have 50 or 60 purchase orders to different artists. And just to give you a sense of scale, we're writing checks to about 5,000 artists a year, right? So this is a lot of work on the project management side. Anytime we're doing commissions, we're doing progress reporting to share out the progress along the way. We have an amazing finance and accounting team, because when you're sending out that many checks to artists, you've got to make sure that things are in order in the books. And then we have an awesome go-to-market team who helps us put together marketing packages and information on the artists and the projects so that we can share about the work that we're doing, because so many people people in the public are just interested in learning more about these artists, where they came from, what their history is. And that's part of the value add that we bring to our team. So a go-to-market team with great marketing, client success, biz dev functions, accounting and finance, acquisitions, and then, of course, the curatorial, which Molly leads. So it's cool to kind of see that inside view of the company. And I think it works pretty well.
I think it's doing all right.
Yeah.
We can keep on doing it that way. Well, I think that it's amazing to me to think back to sitting on my living room floor with you, that very like just the two of us like planning things out, and now here we are, 13 years later and 30 plus people. I mean, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
What's
You
built
know,
out.
it's really amazing. And when you stick to something that you and I have always talked about, we want to be the best in the world, right?
Right.
So let's do the thing that we can truly be the best in the world at. And when you focus in that clearly, be the best in the world at this one thing, right? And ours is transforming places into amazing experiences with the power of art. We are the best in the world at that.
Yeah.
And if we can stay focused on that particular vision, 13 years later, it can really be something more than you ever even imagined or dreamed. And sometimes, you might see articles or awards coming out or things that we do. And sometimes I think the media makes it appear like it all happened overnight. So, yes, it was a 13-year overnight success. Um, but truly, it's just sticking with it, honing your vision and sticking with what you love, and sticking with where you can really add value to the community around you.
Absolutely.
And speaking of community, Molly, you're so ingrained in the arts community and the commercial real estate world and the business side of things. So, what's your perspective on the value that art can bring to corporate spaces or, real estate projects in general?
Oh, it's such a good question. I mean, it's one of the things I always ask people when they're curious about what it is that art curators and consultants do, is I say, when you walk into a space and it just feels good to be there versus a place where you walk in and you're like, something's off. It's probably because of the artwork. It's
Mm,
most likely because of the artwork. And it's
mm,
so fascinating because when I've told that to people, they then start to pay more attention. And I've
yeah,
had like clients and artists both come back and say, "Oh my gosh, now I notice if there's not art or if the art isn't good or if it's like not helping to elevate the space."
yeah.
So it truly does create a feeling and an experience for people. It creates memories. And all of those things are valuable, not just because they're good for like an ROI, right? People want to come back to places that they feel good in, which is great, of course, for our real estate clients because we want them to have people coming back and wanting more. But it's great for the community because the community wants to come in and experience that, and then of course the artists, they're getting their work sold, so it's a win-win for everybody, which is one of the things that I love about what we do. But also, I think one of the most important things to think about when we're putting a collection together and which art is going to go in which space is to think about the intentionality behind it, right? So it's so much more than just finding a nice piece of art that's pretty and putting it on the wall and saying, okay, cool, we did it, we're done. I mean, that anyone can do that. Like, that's easy. You can go to a gallery, you can go to a studio and be like, that's a nice piece of art. Let's slap it up on the wall and now we're good. But really digging into the story
Mm,
about the site itself, what it is that the brand is trying to say, how
mm,
the demographics the client is trying to capture. What are all those little things that we can then take and turn into a narrative and a story and have the art support that. And when
mm.
you get that, that's when you get really exceptional spaces. And that's when it becomes more of that feeling as opposed to a check the box, we have art on the wall. Like, it
Yeah.
truly changes the way you feel in a space.
Mm,
And so that's really the beauty of bringing artwork into a space in such an intentional way. But also, I think that has to start really early, right?
mm,
We've got to make sure that we're involved early so we can really get integrate it into the project and make that artwork like settle into its home appropriately.
Yeah. Well, right before this show, I was talking with Brian McGowan, who's the president of Centennial Yards with CIM Realty. And we were talking about creating amazing places and what that feels like. And he was saying, it's about art, culture, putting these things in place, great design and profitability. Like those are all actually aligned interests, right? They're not mutually exclusive of each other. And it made me think of the triple bottom line concept, right? You want to create places that are about people, that support the planet, that support a healthy environment, and then that all leads to and that supports profitability as well. So it's really about kind of thinking along the lines of more of a principle of abundance
Mhm.
rather than principles that say there's not enough. So I think what you're describing in creating amazing places that use art and culture to enhance the experience is really part of just thinking of an overall great design of a place that people want to be. And places that people want to be are ultimately going to be more profitable as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great way to sum it up. Plus, like, it spreads, right? Like that, it's like infectious. When you hear about a place and somebody's really excited about it and they have those great memories of that place, then their friends hear about it and their friends hear about it, and then it becomes really vibrant and bring gets brought to life really with the people
Yeah.
that are in it.
Well, and one of the things we wanted to talk about today too was some of the variety of people you work with and, their perspectives and what's happening in their worlds too, because we work with so many different types of industries and people. So we might be working with a developer, a designer, an architect. What are some of the challenges that these groups are facing, and how does creating this authentic art experience help them overcome obstacles?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of issues, of course, that everyone's dealing with right now in the post-COVID. I mean, it's still there. I'm not really sure what to call it right
What
now.
version we're on?
Wherever we are in the COVID world, obviously we've got things like supply chain issues still happening, and then of course cost of materials, cost of labor. Like
Mm,
that's just finding a construction company who can actually complete your job and has enough people to do it.
yeah.
So I think some of the major pain points are things that will start to hopefully taper off and sort of regroup in a settled way. I think what's happening right now is that these folks are having to struggle with budgets and
Mm,
penciling out because of all of these issues, right? Like,
mhm,
how do I pencil my project and make it work so that I can actually get investors and like make this awesome thing happen, whether it's new mixed use development or a multifamily housing
mhm,
situation or a new hotel. Like, how do we get this project done when everything we thought before, like 2 years ago, is now changed?
mm,
So how do we like make those numbers work? And of course, one of the things that people like to think of artwork as is like, oh, well, maybe we can cut the art budget. And it's like, well, then, as you just mentioned about abundance, if you cut that art budget and then you still build this great place, but you don't have art in it, you've lost. You've lost the game, right? Like you haven't created a place that people want to be.
mm,
So it's not doing yourself any favors by cutting that out when maybe you could go for like a less expensive wall covering and like cut
mhm,
something from there. Go with a less expensive porcelain tile where those things are important to making a great space, but
mm,
it's not the things that people take away and create memories with.
mm,
So, so I think that's just a thing that people are struggling with right now is just these budgets and trying to figure out how to maximize what they've got.
mm. And when you're thinking about budget, right? I mean, everyone's heard about rising construction costs. Developers are being really strategic. Are there any other tips that you have for people to maximize their budget without sacrificing things in the art experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the like specialties that we have really at Nine Dot is saying like, okay, we've got this pot of money. Here are all the locations. We're going to help figure out exactly where those dollars should go and how to allocate them appropriately so you get the most bang for your buck without compromising the quality of the artwork. So maybe instead of filling the corridors with artwork, let's say in a hotel or an apartment building, those are spaces that are not really hung out in, right? People just walk to find their room or their apartment. So let's take those dollars that are going towards the corridor and actually put those in an area that's way more present and public facing, and that people are going to get a lot more or people are going to be able to give a lot more attention to, such as like the lobby or something outside to gain that attention and get people in the door. So figuring out how to allocate those dollars in a really thoughtful way is definitely the place to start. And of course, there's going to be budgets that, are going to have to sacrifice maybe a few locations, but you can come back and fill those in later. The important part is getting those first impression pieces correct. And those have got to be wow moments. So if we can get that done, then people will have that experience and have that feeling immediately when they walk in, and then it'll sort of carry them through the space. So you don't have to cover every single wall.
So I want to give our listeners a project example. So maybe think about that, and I'll kind of put a little bow on that concept you were talking about. So from what I heard, like number one is really getting us involved early. So you want to think about art and art consulting in the very early stages of the project, even if it's a land deal, right? That's
Mhm.
also a time when we would get involved and help come up with cultural planning, financial models, art typologies for a site. So if you're building a building, think about 60% SD as the time to get us involved. And the reason it's important to come in early is that really can support some of those longer term efforts like Molly was talking about, getting your wow moments correct, giving us the time to go out and bid those art pieces and find the right artists, be able to acquire some of the materials to reduce material costs down the road. So all of that is super important and as part of what we can do in the early stage. And it doesn't cost any more money for us to get involved at the early stage, right? So getting us involved then is really going to maximize your value of what you get from our team as well. So we want to get involved early. We're going to prioritize high impact, high traffic areas like Molly was talking about with lobbies, courtyards or gathering spaces. We're going to elevate the amenity spaces and community areas like lounges or clubhouses. So that's kind of the way that we want to think strategically about how we approach each project overall. And maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit more, Molly, with giving an example of how you approach that with a specific budget that had an incredible outcome.
I think probably the most recent one that I was really excited about is the Citizen apartment building here
Mm.
in the Golden Triangle. It's a huge, huge development, over 400 units, apartments. And I mean, not a bad budget, but certainly for the square footage, had to like stretch every little penny. And I'm sure if you asked anyone how much they spent on the artwork in there, you would have to guess $1 million. I mean, we got these tremendous pieces by local artists, and they're big scale and really high impact, all in this lobby space. We were able to do some murals as well on the outside of the building. And that it was exactly what you were talking about here with these points. We were involved 3 years before the building opened. Like, it wasn't even out of the ground yet when we got involved. So we were able to really hone in on every art location and figure out how we wanted to allocate those dollars. But also then we were able to do things like integrate lighting. And if you just put a light on an art piece, it already feels more expensive. Like, you spent more money because it just looks so integrated and intentional, and like, look, this is a beautiful art piece, we're putting it on display. And so those are the types of, like, getting involved early allows us to be able to do great work like with lighting, or in this particular case as well, we hung a massive sculpture from the ceiling. So we had to get involved early to be able to do that, because we had to figure out, how are we going to tie this thing in? We need these anchor supports in the ceiling before anything else happens. So that extra time allowed us to do some pretty exceptional work in there, on a limited budget. And again, we did prioritize those high impact, high traffic areas. I mean, those are the spaces. We even looked at the tour path that the potential renters would go on. And those are the areas that we spent more money and had, higher impact work. And then we really were thoughtful about the corridor spaces and some of the less traveled spaces, and just hitting those with a light touch of where things really, you needed something, but it didn't need to be that wow factor piece. It just needed to fill a space. And also, of course, all of it fed back up into the overall story of the building itself. But we also had, club, again, like a pool deck, a speakeasy that was really cool, fitness center. All of those spaces were the areas too that we really focused on. And that project is one of my favorites right now, just because it's just so exciting to walk into and see these incredible art pieces by local artists. And then you're like, I'm in an apartment building. Wow. This is like a hotel. This is so cool.
Oh, yeah. It's super memorable. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know that people who walk through there are going, wow, I haven't seen anything like this before. And that really leaves an impression in a way that, ultimately is a positive impact for the property.
Yeah, well, and we even had one of the goals for the client. I remember early on we were talking about, like, well, what do you guys want this art program to help do for your space? And they're like, we want people to like hear about it and come look at the art, and they're not even like interested in renting an apartment. And sure enough, it happened. It happened
Really?
within like the first month of it being open.
No way.
Somebody heard about this great Peter Yumi piece in the lobby and asked if they could come in and take a photo with it.
Whoa, that's
I
so
know.
cool.
So cool. So I was like, okay, this is working. This is definitely working. But
Oh,
I think
that's
too, if you're out
amazing.
apartment shopping, like why would you pick one apartment over the other? Like most apartments nowadays, the amenities, the amenities are pretty similar, because the amenity wars have gotten fierce in multifamily. So like, okay, I have a pool. Okay, we have a fitness center. Okay, we have like a deck, these sorts of things, like check all those boxes. But if if you're comparing those side by side, I mean, wouldn't you rather go live in the space that makes you go like, whoa, when you walk in the front door, and have like a sense of pride about living there and bringing your friends and being able to like show off that area? I think that really helps to distinguish those properties from one another.
Yeah. Well, that was a great example. Thanks for sharing a little bit more, and we'll keep a link in our show notes to Citizen West, so you can take a look at that project and see what Molly's talking about, with crazy sculptures hanging from the ceiling, amazing installations, and you'll see for yourself why it's so memorable to walk through that space.
I wanted to give an example, a project that really allowed the artist to shine while also creating a super distinct sense of place for the property and bringing value to the developer, because it was like just the most perfect project in that way. It was the Exchange at Boulevard One. And this was one of the coolest projects because it is a commercial mixed use space, and it's it could have just been sort of like a strip mall thing, here's some restaurants for the local community and call it a day. But these guys over at Confluent Development brought us in to help bring art and activation and like community to that site. And we got to do these incredible installation pieces, one of which is a mural that wraps the side of a building that has like a medical office inside of it. And it's huge. Kiri Lee is the artist, and it's a giant mandala of a bear face, and then it sort of spreads out, and there are all these different animals that sort of come into play, and it's huge. It's like monumental. It is bright and bold. It is so unexpected for where you think you might be going when you're driving into this parking lot. And it it has become like an Instagram moment. It has become something of like a prideful thing for all of the developers. It's become something that the folks who actually lease the spaces there have all really, like gathered around and decided that this is like a really significant piece and
Oh,
they love
yeah,
it.
it's like an icon.
It's
Yeah.
an icon. And then one of my favorite things about it is they have a preschool that they built on
Oh,
campus
yeah, it's right
too.
across.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so these little kids get to go and, like, go on these art excursions
Oh.
for their little walks. So there's that, and then there's this, like, sort of like a tunnel area that goes under a set of stairs, and we, worked with, Airworks out of Boulder, Colorado, and they built this, like, tree canopy that you walk through, a tree tunnel, and the sun will reflect off of it, and they move slightly in the wind to the leaves, and it's just like one of those things. It's like a magical moment when you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to get my hair cut over here, and then you walk through this and you're like, where am I? This is so cool.
It
So
does. It feels like a
right.
little Willy Wonka tunnel or something that you get to walk through to the other side. It's so
Yeah.
cool.
So that was just one project I wanted to make sure to touch on because it was an unexpected use of artwork and
Mhm.
in a way where they really pushed the boundaries for
Yeah.
commercial development.
Yeah.
And I think that they are incredibly happy with the outcome and just the, like, success that the project has had, and also how much the community values it. Like, the
Mm.
community wants to be there and enjoy it, and that's,
Yeah.
like, the best thing that we can ever accomplish, right? Is making the artists shine, making the developer shine, and getting that community, engaged with that site and feeling really excited to be there.
Mm, that's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that story. It's an incredible experience and a beautiful place to visit. And I can second that. That mural is just tall and a statement piece and so unexpected. And then getting the opportunity to walk through that forest with the little like rainbow leaves on the trees it's just like a little magical entrance to go to the restaurants. And it really changes your perspective and your whole mindset when you're moving into, from the parking lot all the way through to that retail and restaurant center. It's really kind of changing what you expect to see. And it brings this like happiness and joy before you walk into that space. And it's like telling you, okay, you left your car, you're leaving a parking lot, and now you're entering something special.
Right.
And I want to jump over to our another line of our work that's so important because at Nine Dot Arts we really have kind of three major lines of business. One is high impact installations in buildings that want to stand out or make a statement, and that's what Molly was just describing. These commissions, these high impact installation, this sculpture by Eric Dallimore. That's the arm of one of those digging machines painted in flowers that's hanging from the ceiling. It's just so wildly cool. So we've got these high impact installations. That's kind of our bread and butter. But then we have other lines of our business like activations, which is where we'll do pop up art exhibits, markets, performance series in lobbies, in outdoor spaces for our clientele. And then we also do a lot of work with what we call our CAPs, community art plans. And this is probably the fastest growing line of work for Nine Dot Arts right now. We're working with a lot of developers who are privately holding a substantial amount of acreage and sometimes partnering with the city. And so you might have public private partnerships, but where there are large scale neighborhood developments that are going to be built out over sometimes a multi decade cycle. For example, one of these projects that we're working on is in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's 1,400 acres. It's going to be a series of multiple developments or multiple neighborhoods that come to life over the next few years. And in this process, we're looking really at placemaking and how do we use our ABCD method, asset based community development, to draw out some of the most important cultural assets of that community and make sure that these new neighborhoods feel like places you want to be, right? They feel rich. They feel like they reflect the character of that city, and that they're homes for, creative people and supporting this creative economy. And so we'll help our clients figure out how to finance those projects long term, how to create policies that really give back to the community, and then build out typology plans so you know where you're going to have a large scale public sculpture, something iconic, where you might have small discovery moments like, poetry written into the sidewalks or little glass bluebirds in the trees, or where you might have a sound installation, or where you might have something temporary like, a fashion show. So all of these things are what we're thinking about with these big community art plans. But I want to hear from our chief curator about how you're thinking about community art plans. How do you embed art and culture into a site before it's even built? And how do you think about planning for art and cultural experiences prior to a site even starting construction? So would love for you to run with that topic and maybe tell us about a project that you're working on in that realm.
Oh my gosh, so many good things to talk about. Well, I think number one, if you have a site, there's a history to it, right? There's always a story to a site before it's being developed into something, whether it's an old railroad yard or a great example of one that we worked on a few years ago, Gates Rubber Factory. I mean, talk about a rich history. So I think just really backing into what it is that site was, and how do you think about that in the context of this turning into something new? Because you don't want to go in and rustle the feathers of the neighbors and have them say like, what are you doing? What are you doing to our space? This is our space. This is like our this is right next to us. I think it's important to figure out how you integrate into that community early on, to do it in a really respectful way, so it doesn't feel like gentrification and really alienate those who have been using the space or have lived near that space for a long time. So thinking about how you embed that art and culture is really starting off by just thinking about the neighborhood, what's been there in the past, how people use the space or have used the space. And that even if that's just, wild and natural area, for instance, Broomfield, where we're looking at some projects up in Broomfield, like, sure, the developer could just go in and like build a bunch of houses that all look the same and call it a day. But instead of that, they want to, McWinney actually is doing a baseline project out in Broomfield. And before houses even started really popping out of the ground, they wanted to have a community art plan so that as things started to move along in the cycle of these different neighborhoods starting to be built, they had their plan in place so that they knew what needed to happen in what order so that artwork could get integrated thoughtfully into each neighborhood. And essentially it's going to become like a neighborhood or a huge multi-acre development that has artwork integrated throughout the entire site. So people are going to be able to go on like art walks, go and see sculpture, go and see murals, go and see, the crosswalks that are going to be painted on there. Just like really cool, interesting, different ways of integrating artwork into the site. But even prior to that, you can think about how do we get people excited about the site coming online? And that's what that activation stuff, right? So like if we're thinking about how do we get folks excited and like looking over here, because it's just construction, it's not very exciting to look at.
Right.
Well, maybe we bring in an artist to do or maybe multiple artists, and we do like a mural application on all of the fencing that goes around. And then that could be like a weekend activity, and the community could get invited to come and participate or come and watch. You could have some food trucks out there. And then people start to see that not only is this going to like, this is a cool thing that these guys are doing over here. And this is like, I'm excited now, a little bit more excited about this construction going on across the street. But also then you've actually got some community buy-in, and you've got the local creatives that are actually helping to make that space cool before it's even done. And I think that goes a really long way, because creatives are the ones that I feel like artists and creatives are ones that people want to follow. They want to
Mm,
know, what are they doing? Oh, if they're over there, that means it's cool. So I
mm,
think it just automatically gives you some street cred as a developer to show
yeah.
that you're thinking about these things. Um, but yeah, I think that the activations too, in terms of performances, dance, theater, a pop-up event, all of those things are possible throughout the building of a site. And as long as you can think about it ahead of time and dedicate some space and some dollars to it, you're going to gain a lot more attention around your future project from the local community.
Hmm. Well, if you have read anyone in our audience has read Richard Florida, in his book, The Rise of the Creative Class, he talks about the creative economy and how important it is. And he talks about great cities and great places providing access to talent and technology and having high levels of tolerance. So those are his kind of three T's that he uses. But creativity is at the core of those things, right? Using creativity to drive innovation in technology, having talent, because talent really, people want to have jobs that they feel appreciated and valued for, where they're contributing and adding to the world. And that involves creativity and people having that creative freedom to come up with solutions that are unique. And then also, tolerance. Places that are kind of high on the creativity spectrum tend to be tolerant of different types of people, different backgrounds, different lifestyles. And all of those are some of the kind of core principles of how you can build an amazing place where people want to be. Are there any other major parts of community art planning that you think you want to share with our audience?
Um, I think that maybe talking a little bit about the process of it, because
Yeah.
it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It
Mm,
truly is work that's done by all the stakeholders, and then we gather all of that information. I think figuring out that vision initially with the team of architects, designers, developers, community members, and really digging in with them to understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish with that site, and then using that information as well as all of the actual not floor plans, but site plans, excuse me, and looking at that and figuring out, how do we bring that vision to life through artwork, and in which areas. It's not that different from the way that I was talking about Citizen, right? Like,
yeah,
we knew that tour path, so
yeah,
that's where we had these exciting moments. Well, let's look at this, new development and figure out, where are people gonna drive? Where are they gonna walk? What are they gonna see from different perspectives? What does the sight line look like from different areas and angles? Really studying different uses of the space as well. So, looking at all of that, we can put it together a plan then that says, okay, well, if this is a bike path, we know that most people are going to be walking or riding a bike or a scooter on here. So we know that they're going to experience art at a different pace than they are if they're driving a car through an intersection. So
mhm,
how should we treat these areas differently? And
yeah,
that is one of the most important things, because what you don't want to do is walk away at the end of the day with an art plan that just has a bunch of plopped sculpture everywhere.
right.
That's nothing. That's great, cool, there's art in the project, but does it actually help to support the vision? Does it get people's attention? Is it memorable? And is it integrated throughout in a really thoughtful way, where people are excited to then find the next piece, find that next Easter egg on
Mm,
their adventure through their neighborhood?
mm, cool. Well, I want to hear some of your feedback on what's happening across the United States in the world of development, but also in the world of artists. Because Nine Dot Arts works all over the U.S. Let's take a dive on national trends. So, what are you seeing across art and design in different markets?
Well, roundness. I know that sounds very funny, but it's true. Archways,
Huh.
soft curves, even on furniture, on walls, everything's sort of getting this soft edge.
Hmm.
And it's not that different in the art world either. Like, the design in the art world tend to stay pretty well aligned, but it's been really interesting, I think, to look at, various projects that are coming through from across the United States. And we see these renderings of what the spaces are going to be. And that's one of like the most common things I've seen over the last like probably 6 to 8 months is all of this soft rounding. And I'm not sure if that's a reaction to like COVID and everyone being at home all the time and everyone wants everything to be soft and may make you feel warm. And
caress you. I love it.
Exactly.
Just hold me.
No hard edges and lines. So that's one of the trends that I've seen that I find to be really interesting right now. That, and also just this like simplicity, like really sort of like breaking things down into, instead of having like a maximalist approach to things, really sort of like just getting down to the bare bones of whether it's art or design, like allowing things to be simple and elegant without being like overly thought out or overdone in any way. So those are the two things that I've noticed a lot of. And then one other thing would be just like color saturation, like deep saturation and pops of color, like bright colors, which is really exciting to see because that's always fun to integrate into projects. Of course, in the design world, I'm sure they might have other opinions of what's happening, but those are the trends I'm noticing.
So that's what you're seeing on a national level. What about in different markets? Like, how does a project in Atlanta look different from a project in Seattle?
Well, I think that goes back to really the locale, right? Because we know like Atlanta is not next to any water, Seattle is. So there's already like this differentiation in how people approach design based on the location. So Seattle, you'll see a lot more. I've seen several things that have come out of Seattle for design recently, all about water, glaciers, the natural cycle that water takes on. And also the other part is the music history of Seattle. Like that comes out a lot in design there as well, to like celebrate that history of rock and roll. So that's more what I see like in Seattle, whereas like Atlanta, we've got this much more throwback to like a Southern style, more embracing some of the more traditional styles that have come out of the South in the past, a different color palette, totally. Like more pastels, a lot softer. And then, you get to Montana and we've got like heavy rock use, timber, like wood, a lot of that like earth tones to really pull in from the surrounding landscape. So I think design definitely is design is going to be reflective of the space that it's going to be in, of the location itself.
And then how does that play into what you might recommend, you and the curatorial and the 9.Arts team? How does that approach play into what you might recommend for artwork? And feel free to use a couple project examples that you think might be relevant too.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, we know every single client, every single project is going to be different. There's a different story to every single one. Even if we're working on, this is a great example. We did like 6 courtyard Marriotts across the United States. And, we're like, how do we make these? These all have a very similar style. I mean, they have brand standards. They have a look and a feel that kind of get replicated every single time. Because if you go to a courtyard Marriott, in Atlanta, or if you go to one in New York, you go to one in Dallas, they all have like the same footprint. But our job was to set out and make them distinguished from one another based on the location. So even though this was one client and 6 hotels that are all the same brand, every single one of them ended up being totally different because we honed in on the local art community, and the local art community is going to be the best reflection of what's happening there at that point in time. And what's the vibe, what's the culture, what's the reaction to whatever's happening locally. And that's why working with each local community can help really to elevate that story that the design team has put together as well. Like, we want to complement that and bring it up and elevate it with the artwork, and working locally is the best way to do that.
When I think of, things that are specific to each region and how we highlight those, I also think about the creative talent that's in each of those places. For example, in places like Reno, Nevada, you have this incredible depth in fabrication because of Burning Man, and because Burning Man has existed now for so many years. There's all these incredible fabricators in Reno, and then I think about places like Seattle. Right, in Seattle, there's a great community of glass blowing. So many people know glass in that region. So then we can use and tap into the depth of the resources in glass art in that area. So are there other things kind of similar to that you like to tap into?
Oh, definitely. I mean, when we start any project, like, the first thing I want to do is just go down the rabbit holes of what's happening in the creative communities there. Instagram's probably one of my favorite spaces for that, because you get hooked up to these people, and then it's like that person knows this person, knows this person, knows this person. And you start to gain a sense of understanding about, like, what it is that people are really into at that moment in the creative community. So yes, I think that, your example of Seattle with glass blowing is spot on. And I remember asking myself as a kid, I was like, why does everyone blow glass in Seattle? Like, what is it about Seattle that makes that a thing? And I was like, oh, well, if it's dark there and cold most of the year, you want light and heat. So thinking about, like, why I like exploring why certain art trends are happening in certain areas, and trying to get underneath that and figure out how we can then use that in our projects to
Mhm.
really bring that story to life.
Are there other cities that stand out for you where, like, they are known for this type of artwork or this type of approach,
Hmm.
a
Well,
particular medium?
surprisingly, San Antonio is, like, covered in murals. So I'm doing a lot of research right now in San Antonio, and I was so surprised to learn that it is such a mural centric city. They have an
Yeah.
entire map. They have, like, over 76 murals in just a few square blocks, and they continue to add on to them, and it's definitely a part of the culture down there too. They do these huge festivals, they have
Hmm.
competitions, and while I know that, like, that's becoming popular in a lot of cities, like Rhino here in Denver is a great example that's really embraced the mural scene. It's been long entrenched into San Antonio, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, how did we not know this?" Like, that is really cool that this city has actually had sort of an onus around this for much longer than the trend that
Mm.
has started.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, tell us. I always ask people who are on the show a personal question. I want to know about a piece of artwork or a personal art experience, a concert, a play, a piece of architecture, a museum, something that made an impression on you or was especially memorable.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Um, it was one that comes immediately to mind is the very first time that I stood in front of the Georges Pompidou Center in Paris.
Oh, amazing.
And I was just like, what is this? Like, how did this get built, first of all? And, like, you're surrounded by all of this beautiful historic architecture, and then you've got this, like, contemporary, totally unusual, out of the box art center, of course, which is, like, of course, that's why I was there, because I wanted to go see all the contemporary art. And it's so unusual, and I was like, "It looks like a hamster tunnel. Like, this is the coolest thing ever. I can't wait to get in this building and explore." It just knocked my socks off, and I think I was 15 when I saw that for the first time, and then
Mm.
I've just made frequent visits back ever since, because it's just like it just blows my mind every time that I'm there. I'm like, "This is beautiful. This is so unusual. This is such a unique space." Um, and that that is one of the first things that ever got me excited about art, architecture, and, like, the experience that I had with that memory of just like, wow, wow. like, this is cool. This is different. So that would probably be one of my more memorable, like, architectural / art moments. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that I wanted to touch on with those.
I mean, that was an amazing one.
They're so cool. You just can't beat that experience. It's the best. It's such a cool space. What about you?
I would say one of the art installations that I loved the most was Yayoi Kasama's Infinity Room at the Broad Museum in LA. And I was there in LA as part of the urban exploration trip with the Downtown Denver Partnership. And I wanted to see this Infinity Room. I wanted to see the Broad Museum. And so I was there for this conference, and I like totally, went AWOL, left the conference and just went beelined over because we were so close to the Broad Museum. I thought I'll catch the group, but I've got to see this place. So I went to the Broad, which in and of itself is an incredible piece of architecture. And they had the Infinity Room on display. And I got in line. There was a huge line to get in. And at the point where I was getting closer and closer and closer to the room, was looking at the watch, and the museum was about to close. And when I was the next person in line, he looked at me and said, "Okay, today you're going to be the last one that gets to go in." And he said, "So you can stay a little longer." And then he says, "Get ready. This is going to be one of the most incredible experiences of your life."
Did you believe him? Did you actually think that he was, or were you like, oh, seriously, can it be that great?
No, you know how you can tell when
Yeah.
a person is being really genuine? This security guard, he told me he goes in every night after the museum closes, because there's like 15 minutes before they actually shut down the museum. And he gets a little bit of time, and he goes in by himself
Oh
just
my
to
gosh.
enjoy. So this guy was totally genuine that this was going to be one of the most incredible experiences of my life. So I was like, okay. And he opens the door, and I go in by myself. A lot of times people go in groups, but I went in alone. And you walk in, and you're on just one little, like, tiny sliver of black mat. And then he closes the door behind you. And the door on the inside of that door is mirror. And then you realize that the entire room is mirror. And
Oh my
so
God.
all four walls, the ceiling, the floor, it's all this mirrored installation. And so it looks like you're floating in space.
Oh, that's so cool.
And then dangling down from the ceiling are these individual lights, these individual drop lights, and they're tiny, tiny little firefly lights. And so then all of a sudden, when you walk in, the firefly lights are there, and they get like a little bit brighter, kind of the way that
Oh.
happens when you might be in a rural area camping, and the stars get brighter when you look at them longer because your eyes adjust. So it was like your eyes started adjusting to the lights, and the lights got a little brighter, and it felt like there was no gravity. I mean, it just felt like you
Oh.
were floating through this space odyssey, and then all of a sudden the lights start to flicker, flick, 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 and then they all go off, and it's total blackness.
Whoa.
And then they slowly come back in. And
That's
it
so
was,
cool. Did you have any expectation going into it what it would be like?
I love Yayoi Kasama. I love her work. I love her approach. And so I was excited to see this installation, but I had no idea that that's what it was going to feel like. And, every time I had seen it online, there were great Instagram photos of the Infinity Room. And every person that I had seen go in before had taken their phone out of their pocket, and they walk in with their phone to film it. And I got in there, and I thought, oh, I'd probably take a picture. But I got in, and I was so mesmerized, I forgot I even had a phone. And so I didn't document
It's the
anything.
best.
I didn't document any of it, but I just felt it. And
Well, that's
it was incredible.
better.
It was incredible.
That's how art should be experienced, not through a lens. Like, you got to feel it first and foremost. Like, then you can document it. Like,
Yeah.
experience it first. That reminded me, you speaking about that reminded me of being a kid at the Denver Art Museum, and for the first time seeing the installation that they have by James Turrell. I don't even know if it's been up, like where it is anymore, but it was up for a really long time. And it used to just freak me out in such a good way. It's just basically a cut out rectangle in the wall, and then it glows purple, but it's kind of like if you're looking at a Rothko and you start to distinguish that the color is there, because the room is dark, and it's so dark that like you see this little like glow in the wall, but you're not really sure what it is. And then once your eyes adjust, you see this, like, it looks like a big purple canvas on the wall, but it's glowing. And then as a kid, I probably wasn't supposed to do this, but I did it every time I went because I liked it so much. I would put my hand
Inside.
through because I couldn't understand. I was like, I would put my hand through, and it's amazing though. They made it so perfect that even if you like put your hand through or you look down, like you can't see any of the light. So it almost was like it's like it was an alien, a portal to an alien world or something. Like it just blew me away that this could all be done with light and a hole in the wall. I was like, this is crazy.
Amazing.
So cool. They need to bring that piece back.
Yeah, so
So great.
experiential. I saw that one at
Exactly.
the Denver Art Museum too.
Did
I
you?
remember that
Oh,
one,
good.
and I also tried to put my hand in there.
Of course you did. That's what we want to do. Touch the art. I want to touch the art.
I know, I put my hand
Oh,
in a little bit. I was like, "Is I gonna find the back?" And I
I
never
know. No, you can't. And that's what made it so fascinating, because I was like, maybe it just goes on for infinity. Like, what is this space? It's so cool. And your mind just starts to wander on like, how is this possible? Which is one of the things I love about art too, is like, how did you make that? Or how did that come to life? And I think that's part of why people have such great experiences with artwork, because it's a mystery, right? Especially if you're not somebody who's really creative, I mean, it's just mind blowing.
Yeah, I just love the human connection of it, right? Because there, that there's someone out there thought about making this thing and then put all these pieces together, and that was their purpose, right? Their
Right.
purpose was to make this thing and put it in the world for other people to experience and enjoy. And I just love that human to human connection that comes through artwork, because it feels different, right? It's different than seeing a chair or a desk or like the paint on the wall. You just experience something human when you
Yeah.
get to be around a work of art that some other human made. You get
Yeah.
to like see a picture of them, which is cool.
Yeah. You see a little bit into who they are.
Yeah,
That's great.
absolutely.
Good.
Well, if our listeners want to learn more about you and your work, Molly, where can they find you?
I mean, 9.arts.com. That would be the place to go. You can see a ton of our project work on there. It's getting updated all the time with new things coming out. So that's a great spot to track us down and see what's going on.
Awesome. So 9.arts.com if you want to see the work that we're doing there for our clients, or if you are interested in hiring us to help with one of your development projects. If you are an artist, take a look at .folioart.com. That's DOTFOLIOART.com. Dotfolio is where all of our artist portal and artist portfolios live. So check that out, and definitely stay in touch and follow what we're doing, because you'll always hopefully be able to learn about a new artist or a new trend that we're working on. So we'll have links to some of those projects that you heard about in the show notes. And Molly, thanks for being on the show. Look forward to seeing what you do next.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to . And for more information about our guest and what we chatted about, you can check out the show notes at 9.arts.com/podcast. That's NINEDOTARTS.com/podcast. And to keep up with our latest episodes, be sure you subscribe to 9.arts on YouTube, or subscribe to ... wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to get your copy of our free ebook, The Art of Placemaking, where we break down the creative placemaking process and share 5 key tips for transforming your spaces into memorable destinations through the power of art and culture. And you can find that at 9.arts.com/placemaking. And if you are looking to transform your next project with art, drop us a line at letstalk@9.arts.com. Keep on creating, y'all. Until next time.